Go for it.
Hey everybody, welcome. It's a cold and wet day here in Hubbardton, Vermont, but I'm going to film a little video for you anyway about the parts of a canoe specific to wilderness tripping. I've got an old warhorse of a canoe here made by Mad River Canoe that in the day was actually manufactured in Vermont. Those were really high quality boats at that time. They're still pretty good. They're no longer manufactured in Vermont. They kind of consolidated into a much larger company a number of years ago. I believe this is one of the last canoes, years that Mad River was actually manufacturing canoes in Vermont. But I just wanted to take a moment to kind of give you the parts of the boat and the attributes of them. So, first of all, canoes come in all different shapes and sizes, and the tripping boat is really a matter of personal preference. But as I mentioned before, it's usually 6 feet long, and really it's not good at anything but passable at everything. What it needs to be the best at is actually freighting gear, being able to handle 2 people and the gear that are going to be with those people, and that's kind of a trick, an engineering feat. So first of all, you have the back of the boat, and at the back of the boat, you have a seat here, and that seat's the stern. Now keep in mind that paddlers don't always sit on the seat, but they often do, but they'll oftentimes kneel in front of the seat. You can tell this is the stern because the space between the back of the seat and the stern of the boat, which happens to be here, is pretty small, as opposed to the seat in the front, which is known as the bow. And the space for the bow is much larger, which is making room for the bowman's feet, or giving them leg room. So a common misnomer is that the sternman is the steerer of the boat and that the bowman is the motor of the boat. That's very, very elemental, and once we get on the water, I'll be able to explain why that really is super basic. You know, most people have paddled a canoe, but few people have actually been taught how to do it correctly, and it takes a lifetime. It's really a beautiful dance. The reality is there's a reason they call these divorce boats, because it really takes a lot of chemistry between 2 people to be able to paddle a canoe. So not only do we have those seats in the boat, but we also have some wood right here. Now this has been replaced, and I didn't do a great job. I only have 1 canoe here. I actually have a fleet, but I only have 1 here right now that's even worth showing you. And this is called the center thwart, or the yoke. Center thwart or yoke. And there's a cutout here that allows for the boat, which I'll demonstrate in a moment, to be put up on the shoulders and carried for a portage. So many canoe tripping boats have other thwarts, a thwart here or a thwart up front, and those do not have the cutout or the yoke for the carrying, but all boats have that center thwart. What's the purpose? As I mentioned, it's for carrying, but it also allows for rigidity for the canoe. This canoe itself has been folded around rocks, and it's been smashed up, and it's got the battle scars to prove it. But the other reason that we have these thwarts is to tie your gear down to, which I will demonstrate later. You also have here these epoxied in D-rings. This is also for gear tie downs. I've got 2 here and 1 up front, and that's kind of specific to canoeing in really rough waters, in environments where losing your gear could be extremely dangerous. So the sides of the boat, here and here, those are called the gunnels. We're really not going to use starboard and all that. That's really silly and for much larger crafts than a canoe, but they're just the gunnels. And the gunnels are normally made out of aluminum, white oak or ash or plastic. They're pop riveted into the side of the boat. You can see where a lot of those pop rivets have come right off here. Again, because the canoe's been wrecked, it's still serviceable, but it's been wrecked. And what those gunnels do is they provide rigidity for the boat. Without the gunnels, the boat would just kind of be flopping around with no real support. We have the stern deck and the bow deck, which have handles for carrying. Whenever I can, I try to have 4 people carry a canoe if I've got enough people, and they can just hold on to the gunnels. But when it's only 2, people stand on opposite sides and pick up from these deck handles. There's tie-outs in the bow as well in the stern. Those help with tying gear, or a small amount of gear, like a windbreaker or rain gear, onto the deck, but also they allow us to tie the boats up if we leave them overnight or for a period of time in the water. Excuse me. So now we're going to just kind of some more tricky pieces to the boat. One is if I flip the boat all the way over, this obviously is called the hull, and there's a line down the center of the hull. That's called the keel. The sharper the angle of the keel, the better the boat tracks, so the straighter line it goes in. The reality is that you don't want a boat to be able to go too straight, because it becomes more difficult to maneuver. If you're in a racing canoe that's going to go straight, then indeed that's what you're looking for. But you'll see this tripping boat has a pretty solid keel, so it's going to handle what's called tracking pretty well, but it's still going to be maneuverable. The boat almost has three different keels: the center keel and the keel on either edge. And almost like a snowboard or a ski, we can edge on these when we're in more technical waters, meaning lean the boat so that we track on the sides of the boat as opposed to the center of the keel. A whitewater boat, which I have a number of whitewater boats, has almost no keel at all because it is made to spin with ease, and it doesn't really need to track or necessarily make up a lot of time in still water, whereas a tripping boat might need that. So again, kind of a moderate keel here. What we have here is where the boat actually turns up and comes into our sidewall. This is the sidewall, and that turn is called the tumble home. The tumble home can be further and up the sidewall, depending on the purpose of the boat. With a tripping boat, you want a pretty good, what we call berth, hold on, which is side to side of the boat. That's the berth. The narrower it is, the faster the boat it is, but the less it is for maneuvering purposes. So again, we're trying to kind of strike that middle zone where we've got lots of berths so we can fit a lot of gear, but not so much that the boat is just kind of sloppy and floundering in flattish water. So again, that turn right there, that's called the tumble home, and it's called the tumble home because when you lean out on it, it gets to a point where the boat has kind of reached critical force and will flip over on you. Where the water line comes up on the sidewall of the canoe, the space above that's called freeboard. And we really are looking for about 4 inches of freeboard, even with a fully loaded boat. Keep in mind, say you have, 350, 400 pounds of person, and then you got 100 pounds of gear for each person. That's close to 500 pounds. That's a lot for a boat. So we're looking for that kind of 4 inches of freeboard there. Tumble home, freeboard. So again, those are kind of your basic parts of the boat, and each piece has an attribute to the canoe. You know, the higher the tumble home is, the more agile the canoe is. And if you have a high tumble home with a wide berth, it's still fine on a tripping boat, but it's going to be for a more advanced paddler. Whereas you can have a really large sidewall with a big tumble home like this. That's really perfect for a canoe expedition because it can handle a lot of gear. It's going to be a very stable boat, but it's not perhaps not going to handle as eloquently as a more refined canoe. So the reality is that the boat is made to go one direction. Doesn't mean that the boat doesn't spin. It can spin, but there really is a front and a back to the boat. Those are not really interchangeable. So again, the boat can spin, but there is a front and back. So the back is definitely the stern, and the front is definitely the bow. And there are certainly paddling strokes that are specific to each member of the team, but no job is more important than the other. The only piece that I would recommend is that there is more weight, and you can counteract that with gear in the back of the boat than in the front of the boat. That ensures that the front of the boat can be turned with a little more prowess, if you will. So I'm sure that I'm skipping over a number of pieces. I guess I do want to recognize that the decks of the boat, as well as the gunnels, allow us to stable the boat. We actually sit on the boat and stabilize it like so. Keeping in mind that a boat is the most stable in water, fully in water. It's the least stable when it's half in the water and half out of the water. And really, really picky canoeists actually never have their boat half in, half out of the water. They always wet load, meaning they get in the boat when it's fully in the water. And they would never drag the boat on the ground, et cetera, et cetera. These boats can take a beating, and my boats have taken a beating. But I think that kind of gives you the basic idea of the parts of the boat. The seats, bow and stern, the thwarts, gunnels, the decks, sidewall and freeboard, tumble home, and the keel.